So I've always been into solar panels and things. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the late 70s going to elementary school, there was some house. I mean, it was the late 70s, and they had like solar panels up there. I don't know what kind of solar panels they were. They were clearly solar panels, and they were doing something. And I don't know what grade I was in at that point, fourth grade or something like that. Fifth grade, maybe. Third grade? I don't know. I don't remember. But I remember it made a one hell of an impression because I always thought it was pretty cool to be in a position where you're kind of getting power from the sun. I thought that house was powering itself from the sun. Of course, now we know you can't really. Well, you can do that, but it's you need a lot of batteries, a lot of batteries to do that completely. But that's not the point. The point was that they had that technology up there, and in my life at that age, nobody around had any kind of technology like that. So just to see it made an impression on me. So these are just some of the images of like, here's a battery I have. It's really no good. It's look at that, 11 and a half. But I keep it around so I can swap it out, like without having to swap out the actual battery of a car. If a battery goes bad around, and I want to go get a new battery, I can just grab that one and swap it in for the core. You know what I mean? Anyway, so here's a couple other, but I try to keep it charged nevertheless. And I have a couple of here. These are two actually separate systems. And this back one, this rear one, it goes to my cars. Whichever one I'm not really using that much. I tend to use one car, and then I have a truck, so I don't use it as much as the car. So I make sure that the batteries get a good peak on them at least every couple days. Like hit up like around 13 volts, but. So this is like a 100-watt panel, and notice the strain relief. I think the strain relief is a pretty important thing because it's just held on that. Like I've had them, a couple of these fall off. These are old. These are at least 10 years old. These panels, but I've had that what is that, silicone? See where it's held on there? Just come right off. And I've repaired it successfully, gotten it back on there. And if you clean it and everything, you shouldn't even have to take it apart. You should be able to just kind of. But the strain relief helps to, like if you're 50 feet away and you're like, if you're like me, you're moving these things around, you're messing around with these things. So you need them to be a little bit more robust. So, and that wire there that I have, this is the thing they never sell you, but like you can just buy the underground like low voltage wire for like lights in your garden. That wire works great for it's still pricey, because it's copper, but it's great. You don't have to buy like the expensive solar wire, and definitely put the ends on yourself. You can save a ton of money by just doing that, just buying like the low power wire. The bigger solar panel does have the more expensive wire I bought years ago, but if I was going to buy new wire, I would definitely just buy this low power. I would buy 12 gauge. This is 14 gauge, so it's at least the minimum that you'll see in your house. But it's stranded, so it's nice and flexible. So this goes up, little crappy charger. What's that, like a $20, $30, not even a $30 charger, probably $15 charger. Find on Amazon. Just plug it into the lighter, and let it go, man. And that charge controller right there will moderate the power and shut it off when it's charged up. Typically it goes to sleep, the truck, and then you open the door and then that wakes everything up, so it goes back into charging again. But that does the job, man. 10 amps, that's that panel, that 100-watt panel will never put out more than 5 or 6 amps, so that's easily all in control. Again, that wire, that's the underground cable wire, low voltage wire. So I dig the fact that you can just sort of, without having to tap into any wires, electrical system, be able to access power. Now what we're looking at here is my trailer, and that's in there. I have a bigger battery system. And that's really the biggest system I have, which is not that big. It's like three batteries, three AGM batteries. And there's another panel. That panel is hooked up in parallel with the bigger panel up down here, the bigger one. So those two are both sort of keeping those batteries topped up in the trailer. And we'll see them in a minute. So they just sit out there and they just kind of like a good investment, you know, they bring something in for you and then you don't have to worry about it so much. And I've used the my bigger system for backups. That's in the trailer because we were camping, and I still haven't. That's the other thing when you're camping, moving around these panels, you know, just being portable enough. You know, a lot of people keep them tied down, but I can't seem to settle on it. And I've never met a roofer who was okay with panels on your roof. So I just put them around. I have a bunch more panels that I don't even use because, you know, the size of your system is, you know, the number of panels depends on, you know, I mean, you don't need so many panels if you don't have that much battery to fill. When a couple of panels can fill up your batteries pretty quick. It's like kind of like a water cistern system. You know, you're not like, oh, I can only use power when when it's sunny. It's like your panels are there gathering sun whenever they can, and hopefully you have enough battery where you never stop charging. But see, everything's charged up at this point. So what do I need more panels for if all the sun coming into them? I guess I should put a grid tie system. Now here's a small system. This one small panel, 25 watt I think. And this is like the example of what all systems are. You have a battery in the middle, an inverter on the right, and a charge controller on the left. And that's it. That all systems, big and small, are going to be pretty much just what you see right here, those three items. And that's why I would never buy like a Jackery or any of these systems that come with, like, it's the battery and it's the charger and it's everything all built. I would never do that. Because these systems, I can take this charger off and put it on with another system. And I've had that happen where, you know, maybe a charge controller burns out or a batteries go bad all the time. I mean, that's the thing that you're going to be replacing in your system. I think probably, unless you do like blow things up. The inverters, hopefully you don't destroy those. But the battery's got to be replaced all the time. I don't want to, you know, I want a system that I can pull the parts out of. And they're really all the same. They're all going to have a solar panel, a charge controller, a battery system, and most of them will have an inverter. Like, for example, that system right there with the coiled up wire, that's for my car. That will not have an inverter, right? The car is just the car's battery. So there'll be a charge controller, and we'll see that in a minute. There's a charge controller in the trunk of my car that I have wired up to the battery, directly to the battery. But here, you know, so I just have this panel, and there's my underground cable, my 14 gauge underground cable, and I've put the ends on those cables myself. I just crimped them up, soldered, I think I did solder them up, wire tied the bottom of those wires, and here's the inside of the trunk of my car. This is an MPPT controller, very efficient controller. It's like $35-40, and I'm plugging it in there. And what the MPPT controllers, and this is a cloudy day, so we're not going to get the full 5 or 6 amps out of that panel. But it'll get us up to, over 1 amp, 1.5 amps. That's pretty good for a cloudy day that it is. And that battery's pretty much charged. It's already up 13.2. So here's the inside of the trailer that we saw before. And there's a panel just sitting there doing nothing. And there's there's the 3 different systems actually right there. And here's the wires coming in from those larger panels. And this is the biggest system I have, which is not that big. Actually, I made a system from the love of my life, my girlfriend, that's even bigger than all this stuff. And because she didn't want a generator. So here's a MPPT controller, a pretty nice controller. bringing in 7 amps, as you can see right there from the solar panels. But the batteries are pretty much all topped off. The temperature, and they're 13.5 volts on the battery. So they're at a, they're in a trickle charge state right now. And even though I believe so these batteries, there's 3 of them, 120 and then 100 and 100 amp hours. So it's about a 3600 watt hour system right there. That's all just 12 volts, all in parallel. That's how you would do a parallel system at 12 volts. And you'll notice my big thick wires, because you're going to get many amps going through those wires, and you want those crimps and those wires to be in there tight. You don't want any looseness on any of that stuff, because if you feel heat on any of your connectors, it's because they're not crimped tight enough. They're not soldered. They're not making a good enough connection. So you need big fat wires too. I think the main wires are 000 gauge. Those wires we're looking at there, I'm not sure what gauge they are, but the main those bad boys right there coming off the batteries, those main wires are supplying the entire power for the system. Those are like 000 gauge wires. They're real thick. And there's the inverter, another sine wave inverter. There's light, and I think I hooked up a fan at some point because it was getting hot in there, and I'm like, so hot in here, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've got all this power, I'll just hook up a fan. But that's a 2500 watt inverter from years ago. Still works great. That was in a house fire, actually. That guy still works. And those big thick wires are 12 volts, and and so it's 12 volts in, and so there's the actual amperage coming directly out of the batteries at 12 volts. It's 9 and 9.4 amps. So that's what's coming out of the batteries right now for a very moderate load, for a very small load, right? Now the PV system is pulling in 9 amps from the solar panels, and it's like a fairly cloudy day out there. Okay, so now I'm pulling out this heater, and that's 250 watts, 2.1 amps, 2.1 amps, right, on AC. And so I hooked this up, and then all of a sudden, bam, the solar power converter is pulling in a lot more from the PV system, because now the load is starting to get a little bit challenging, because now we're at 200, 300 watts, 16.7 amps we're pulling in from the PV system. And so we're not drawing the power through this controller. We don't typically draw power through the controller. We just draw it directly from the battery. We can tell the health of the battery by the voltage. Now here's the amps. So we got 30 amps coming in, right? 30 amps over the 12 volt DC line. Now that's about 3 amps on the AC line, but that's why we need such fat wires on the DC side. If you're going to have a big system on the DC side, especially a low 12 volts, this is going to easily can top out. This can go up to 100 amps. And I need there's no breakers on this system, by the way. There needs to be breakers on there, but they can easily hit 100 amps for when you're getting a challenging load. But still, the batteries are at 13 volts, delivering out 30 amps. So they're handling this, and then the PV is trying to recover as many amps, so only about half the amount. And there again, there's the system. So the systems are pretty much all the same, right? Each one has a controller and batteries. And then they may or may not have the inverter, right? Because the inverter is like how you're getting power from the system. You want an inverter if you're doing any kind of camping or normal, regular things that you're plugging in. But for your car, you're keeping your car charged. All you need is the charge controller. So there's the system, the charge controller. Clipped out in the upper right, there's the inverter. So those are the 3 main parts of the system, big or small. And in the black wires at the top, that's coming in from the PV system. And and then here's a small version, same thing, right? The inverter on the right, the charge controller, and our little tiny battery. And then our panel. But it's the same exact configuration And actually, the parts are interchangeable to a degree, right? When you talk about big power, it becomes a problem. Again, but here we don't have an inverter. There's the charge controller, some kind of crazy one from years ago, battery, and then of course the solar panel. Again, here's the same thing. That's the charge controller. You don't see the battery because it's in the car. This is wired up to the 12 volts through some 12 volt access in the back. But so they're basically all the same thing, and it's just a matter of getting your system hooked up to whatever it is that you're trying to do. Maybe you just want to have like a couple lights while you're camping. Maybe you want to run a freezer like while you're camping. Maybe you just want something in a shed that's distant and far away from you. There's different things, like maybe you just want to keep your car charged, or you just have a battery, right? Or a lawnmower in your garage where you need to keep the charge going. But there's a whole host of reasons why you want to do that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.